everyone. I'm Traci Arieli, end of life doula and founder of Comforting Closure. In today's episode, we will explore a deeply emotional and complex journey, losing both parents within a short span of time. The challenges of navigating differing end of life wishes and the personal toll it takes can be overwhelming. We're joined by Victoria Beelik, author of Watching My Parents Die. In her book, Victoria shares her story of facing her parents' deaths, dealing with the medical decisions, and the emotional aftermath of loss, all under the heavy cloak of a family secret. Victoria, it is an honor to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me today.
Before you read from your book, can you share a bit about your journey and what inspired you to write Watching My Parents Die?
Oh my. Well, I think my journey started when I was just a child. I had the best parents in the entire world, but I never would have imagined that towards the end of their life, I would go from being the child to the parent. And there was so much that went on when I started caring for both of them because they both aged very closely together. My dad became dependent shortly afterwards. My mom became dependent upon me, and I didn't have any brothers and sisters. But as this journey took place, I started feeling very alone. Even though I had great people around me, I just didn't feel like I could talk to anybody about what I was feeling and what was going on because I didn't think anybody would understand. So towards the end, I finally opened up to one of the hospice nurses and talked to them a little bit. And she said, "You need to put this down in words." She said, "What you're having the guts to tell me is what a lot of people experience, but they don't feel like they can talk to anybody about it. Everybody feels alone. They have no idea that there's other people that understand." Hence the book, Watching My Parents Die.
So I understand that you are going to read from two different places in your book. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. And I know that these are intense passages. So for anyone who's listening or watching, just know that this could be a trigger and please take care of yourself.
Yes, please. All right. The first section I chose was when my dad came home from the hospital, and we were immediately putting him on hospice for the last time because he'd been on hospice several times. It wasn't long before the hospice nurse showed up. She sat us down to discuss the doctor's recommendations and review the conversation that had taken place while he was still at the hospital. Since my mom was still in panic mode, she sat down next to my dad and explicitly advised the hospice nurse that she used to be a nurse and would be helping my dad get through this. The nurse had just taken a moment to look at me in a confused manner, and my dad interjected and said, "This is my wife. She will not be making decisions on my behalf or for condition or treatment. My daughter, Vicky, will make all decisions and has full authority to determine any treatment or actions on my behalf." My mom went pale and became angry and flustered at the same time. She insisted that she would be the caregiver and decision maker. By this time, my dad became angry. The nurse still hadn't had a chance to say much. My dad looked at my mom and sternly, very sternly, told her that she was irrational, wouldn't look out for his best interests, and wouldn't be able to think clearly. Her suffering would affect his best interests, which were to die. This was something I never thought I'd hear from a father who'd spent the last 61 years with a wife that he was inseparable from. And so the nurse proceeded with the official advance directive, Holt's form, emergency contact deals, and the signed form acknowledging that my dad had designated me as his decision maker. And then it slipped. The final part of the discussion. The nurse acknowledged my dad's desire to fulfill death with dignity, also known as MAID. The infamous mortal sin in the Catholic world, suicide. Regardless of age, suffering, terminal status, it was seen as suicide to a Catholic, and it was a mortal sin. Did I say that twice? Let's say it again. Regardless of the reason or condition, to take one's own life is a mortal sin, and there is no heaven for sinners. My mom didn't understand death with dignity and asked for an explanation from the nurse. It took 3 different explanations in 3 different ways before my mom understood. Neither my dad nor I had a chance to say anything before my mom became angry and told the nurse that this was not an option. Catholics don't take their own lives, and it was a sin. He could not do this because she wouldn't see him in heaven. So this was not an option. Without words, the nurse was able to acknowledge our wish. Without words, my dad and I knew that he'd made up his mind, regardless of my mom's disagreement. So now I'm going to move forward um, to when we actually performed it. Bear with me. So this is towards the end when we were actually going to fulfill his last wish. He never left his chair. There were no accidents. He didn't eat. He didn't drink. We never put him back in the wheelchair. Nothing went in and nothing came out. Jane, his caregiver, arrived around 4:30 p.m. The plan was for my mom and Jane to go back and pick up food. My dad woke up and said, I want to get my sushi from our favorite sushi place. We planned this because his favorite sushi place was a half an hour away. Between driving there, getting the food, and driving back, my mom and Jane would be gone for an hour. We knew this. As predicted, my mom said, I don't want to drive that far, Vic. I'm not driving that far. I looked at her and said, Hey, Mom, come on. We don't have that much time. We don't know how much time my dad has left. I'd go, but I have to work. Thankfully, Jane said, Yeah, let's go. I'll drive. As soon as I heard the garage door close, I prepared the medication, not taking any second for granted. It was nerve-wracking because it was toxic. I had to put on gloves and use a glass that would be disposed of directly after. They told me to get sorbet because it would burn his throat. The medication had to come out of the fridge and it had to be cold. And the frozen sorbet would soothe his throat that would be caused by the burning of the liquid. I went into the back room with everything, and my dad just looked at me and cried as he said, Thank you so much. Thank you for this. Thank you for helping me let go. I just looked at him and I didn't cry. I felt like I should cry. I felt like I should be sad. But at the moment, I just felt grateful that I was able to give my dad the best gift I could have ever have given him.
Thank you for sharing that.
I know. Sorry.
So, after you gave him the medicine, I know that you didn't tell your mom. Your mom returned, and
No,
you just said that he fell asleep and he went in.
I didn't even do that. I had to pretend like I knew nothing. So I
Mm.
went back to my desk and I sat down and I started working. And Jane called me to let me know she was about 5 minutes out. She knew what was going on. I said, okay. So I just went back to work and I literally had to put on a straight face, pretend like I knew nothing and that I'd been at my desk the whole time. So my mom got home and Jane was supposed to have my mom go back and get my dad. And my mom said, How's dad doing? And I said, I don't know. I checked on him about an hour ago and he was asleep, so I didn't bother him. And my mom said, Jane, why don't you go get Vic and let's get him up and bring him to the table? And she didn't know what to do because that wasn't part of the plan. So she looked at me and I didn't know what to do. So she went ahead and went back. And then she called and she said, Liz, Vicky, I think you should come back here. Your dad's away.
Mm.
And when my dad died, I I mean, I know they talk about grief. I know they talk about sadness, but honestly, I was so relieved. You know, he fell asleep holding my hand, telling me he loved me. We joked around because he asked me when I told him that the medication was pink. He said, why is that so weird? I said, this is what we put horses to sleep with. We euthanize horses with a lethal injection of it. And he said, You're putting me to sleep like a horse? I kind of went, yeah, I am, Dad. So that was what my last moments were with my dad. But now I had to go and pretend like I knew nothing. And I had to go and watch my mom just lose it because she just lost a partner of 61 years. And I had to pretend like I knew nothing, knowing that I was the person that administered the lethal dose of medication to help my dad peacefully pass.
I know your mom died a few months after that. She got sick and died a few months after. And Did she ever know the
She did
truth?
not.
Okay. How did you handle keeping that secret? And did anyone else know? I mean, was it just you and Jane that knew, or did anyone else know?
My husband knew what was happening. A couple of my cousins knew, and one friend knew, and that was it. Because I come from a very religious family, and there were a lot of family members that I knew if they found out, they would probably tell my mom, even though it was against her best interest, and they would completely abandon us because of my actions. So there weren't a lot of people that I could talk to ahead of time about this.
And so your mother never found out, and keeping that from her, that must have been devastating. How did that affect your grieving?
Well, I grieved for my dad while he was declining. And, I grew up watching this strong man that was absolutely hysterical, but would take care of everything immediately if anybody needed it. So, realistically, the last week of his life, all he was a very sad, very mentally aware, but he was the shell of a man that was so embarrassed because his daughter had to watch him turn into this person. And it was mortifying.
So you said that in your family, you have a very religious family, and you wrote this book. So now your whole family knows. How has
Right.
that been? Not only the reaction from them, but the reaction from people who've read the book and know about the book that aren't even related to you, that you haven't met.
Been an interesting journey, that's for sure. I have had family members that still had no idea what happened, and they read the book, and now we don't talk anymore because they feel like I made the wrong decision by not telling my mom. I made the wrong decision by helping my dad peacefully pass, and they were mortified. I have other people that were amazed that I was strong enough to do it. And in regard to my book, I've had so many different types of responses. I have had some brutal responses where, again, people have said, you had no right to make these decisions without your mom. You had no right to help your dad peacefully pass. And my dad had no right to make that decision for himself. That was heartbreaking. I get those responses pretty regularly. But also, I've had people come to me and say that because they read my book, their parents had passed years before, but they realized they weren't alone. So, one lady said she'd been carrying guilt on her shoulders for 2 years just because some of the things that had happened while she was caring for her parent. I've had other people come forward and say, thank you so much for a realistic expectation from a non medical perspective. This is personal, so it's not based on science, it's not based on religion, it's based purely on experience. So some good response and some terrible response.
Yeah. So I know that you and I spoke about personal autonomy and what that really means, and um, it is so surprising to me that people, and I don't know why it's surprising to me that people would actually come to you and say your father had no right to make that decision. Um, and you and I've had the religion conversation, um, and navigating that, since you were very religious growing up. How has this changed your views on life and your spirituality?
Oh, yes, dramatically. And one of the most impactful events that has affected me, has been the way my mom actually passed. Because at the end, I had an opposite end perspective. My dad went peacefully. My mom went brutally. It was violent and it was painful. And I was next to her the entire time, trying to help her. And at the end, she was just screaming, screaming, literally. I thought the cops were going to be called for me to help her, to give her all of the morphine and all of the Ativan that I had just to put her out of her misery.
Mm.
So I got to see both sides. After seeing that, really, My belief that I made the right decision for my dad was even more enforced. It was stronger than ever because I saw both sides, and I never want to experience what my mom experienced. Some people call it chicken. Some people say I'm choosing my time and I'm not supposed to choose my time, but I've seen it. I've seen it up close and personal. And I know that I don't want to do that to others ever. I don't want anybody to ever see what my mom went through in me. I don't. But I don't, maybe I am a chicken. I don't want to go through that pain and that suffering and that prolonged period where you know that death is close, but you can't do anything to get away from it.
Yeah, I think that people are more afraid of the dying process than actually what comes after dying.
Yeah, I agree.
Could you share with us how the decision for medical aid in dying, also called MAID, came about for your father? What were some of the conversations that you had with him that led to this decision?
Oh boy. Well, my dad found out at then Death with Dignity from a friend, from a sailing friend, as a joke. And his sailing friend said, "Well, when I do my race, my last race, and I know that I'm sick, I'm going to do Death with Dignity." My dad said, "What's that?" He said, "I'm going to make it easy on everyone around me and just jump off the boat where no one can catch me." My dad was like, "Great idea." So he did the research, he found out about it, and he came to me about it. And he said, "Vicky, this is what I want to do. I need your help. I need you to be my daughter. I need you to support my last wishes." There was no question. My dad was amazing. And it was painful for me to think about because that would be the end. But I was able to step back and see what he was going through. And so that really affected how I made the decision. But ultimately, my dad led this journey.
Mm.
I was just a contributor. I gave him the rose to the rowboat. So
Now, I know you spoke about how your family reacted to this, and some of your family members said you know right to keep it from your mom to shield her. Looking back, um, how do you reflect on that decision to shield your mother from the truth? And do you think that it was the right decision now that you have had some space from it?
I think it was 127.35% the right decision. Absolutely. And I'm so happy my mom never found out. It would have broken her. She always believed that she was going to see my dad in heaven. And if she would have found out about this, she wouldn't have that belief. She wouldn't have that hope anymore. And it would have broken her. She passed away thinking that she was going to see her partner of 61 years ago.
Mm. What advice would you give to other people who are going through the same thing that, um, who are going through that same disagreement about end of life choices within their family?
I can only offer my experience. I have found since my parents passed away that some people listen and accept, and some people don't. But the best advice I can give is that at the end of the day, whether it's ourselves or somebody around us that we love that's terminal, it's not about us, it's about them. And what do they want? And often, as I experience this more and more people come forward, people are scared to lose the person they love. They want to hold on for as long as they can. That's why when somebody on hospice is on their last days, the family is doing everything that used to be normal to keep them. So facing death with dignity, that just brings it one more step closer to the end. And for some people, that's the most difficult challenge. So if I can help others understand that it's about that person and no one else, yes, there's emotions involved, but at the end of the day, it's that person. And we have to honor what that person, that loved one wants.
So I know your father had a pulse and an advanced directive. Did you guys do that before he got really sick? At least the
Yes.
advanced directive, yeah. So did you have that discussion at the time that you created the advance directive.
About wanting to
D-
care for him and do what he wanted?
Yes, yes, because with the advance directive, as you know, the
Yes,
real legality of it, because so many things can happen, you can't put that on a piece of paper to, a 1 to 2 sheet piece of paper. And so the real legality of what's on that is the medical advocate, the POA, the health power of attorney or medical power of attorney. And
right.
so I'm assuming that you were that POA.
Yes.
And so did you have those intense discussions with your mom beforehand?
I had the discussions twice because I was the POA for both of my parents.
Okay.
When we set up all the documentation for my dad, my mom was part of that. Um, we already knew she was starting to show signs of dementia. So there were conversations that my dad and I had. Everything was documented. My mom was very upset during some of that conversation, but within a couple days, she had forgotten about it. I
Mm,
don't think she even remembered what my dad and I had discussed and agreed to in writing. The POA, I was POA for my mom. At that point, there's nobody around for me to depend on. Initially, she said she wants me to do everything I can to keep her alive. We revised everything, and she finally knew she was just suffering so badly towards the end, towards the last month of her life, that she wanted nothing. She wanted no. As a matter of fact, 911 got called at one point because of her pain. And we looked at the pulse and they said, we can't do anything unless you want to be brought off hospice
mm,
and taken to the hospital. We can't do anything.
yeah.
And my mom just cried, screeched because she was in so much pain and said, no, nothing. I'll suffer through this. I just want it to end.
Yeah. Oh, I'm curious. How did the hospice react to that change? I mean, it was such a change within the last month. How long was she in hospice for?
Oh, 7 days,
Oh, wow.
only
That's,
7.
eh, I always have these conversations. People just do not take advantage of hospice. And, I know we spoke about, in fact, of, hey, hospice isn't about dying. It's about the quality of life. And it's about, think of them as your, the feel good, you're getting the feel good pills, because
Right,
that's really hospice is here to make you comfortable. And it doesn't mean you're in bed all the time, or it doesn't,
right. I wish more people would accept that hospice is there to help. I wish my mom would have accepted it sooner. Unfortunately for my mom, things unraveled so suddenly that for as much pain as she was in, it took that degree of change for people to recognize that there was something terribly wrong with her. We called it the big bad monster. We didn't
mm.
really know what it was, but we knew she was dying.
Because you live in California like me, and I know how long it can take to get the medication. But we're only one of the states. There's only 11 that where it's legal right now, um, and it being medical aid in dying. Um, did your mom's refusal to allow your father to do this, did that slow down the process at all, or cause
Yes.
roadblocks?
Oh, yes. When hospice initially found out that this was the plan, they got on the phone with me, myself, and my dad, and talked about the entire family being involved. And we told her, we said, my mom, she doesn't know, she's not going to be a part of it. And there were breaks put on the plan immediately. And they met, the whole group met, and they said, we cannot support this unless your mother's on board, unless the entire family knows. Fortunately, it was just myself and my mom. So that stopped. My dad was so angry and he was so sad and he just didn't want to be involved with anything. He was heartbroken. About, what was it, a month or two later, one of the hospice nurses from the year before came to fill in for our regular hospice nurse. And when she came in, she saw how much my mom had changed because my mom was getting dementia. She went back to the group and discussed the changes that she'd seen in my mom. After that, they came back, talked to me, and decided to move forward with a plan to help my dad pass.
Thank goodness for
It
that
was
hospice
challenging.
nurse.
Yeah, they were tremendous, tremendous.
How important was the support system around you during this time, and what kind of support did you find most helpful, during the whole process of your father being ill and after the fact, and your mother, and after the fact while you were grieving? What does that support look like?
Well, let me tell you, during this time, it was very challenging. My very best friend in the whole wide world, I think you know the name, 31 Flavors. Um, I took Muffin Top to a whole new level. Anytime something would become challenging, 31 Flavors was my go-to. Chocolate. Chocolate ice cream with chocolate fudge and chocolate toppings. You name it. I don't know how I didn't get diabetes. And then at the opposite end of the spectrum, I would swim. And I wanted to be underwater away from everything. And if I was underwater, I couldn't hear them screaming. I couldn't hear my mom crying. It was the only escape I had because I felt like I was alone. I felt like really, even though people wanted to be there for me, including my husband, who was amazing, I just didn't feel like I could talk to anybody about what I was really feeling, which was a lot of anger and a lot of frustration. There was so much anger.
What would
So 31 flavors, yay.
what would I'm a Ben and Jerry's gal personally, but uh, what would have helped? And looking back, what would have, was there anything that you would have said, would have really helped me during this time would have been this?
Honestly, I think what would have helped was knowing somebody else that had gone through what I was going through and knowing there would be somebody who would have understood what I was going through. That would have been somebody I could have opened up to, somebody I could have cried to because I didn't feel like I could cry in front of the people around me. Just somebody who had been in my shoes and just genuinely understood what was happening from a very, very deep level. That would have made so much difference.
Mm. What was your writing process like from the book? I could only imagine because the emotional aspects of your experiences um, were coming out, right? And so you had that, but you also had the demands of writing, getting something done.
Uh, Actually, I have been asked this question before, and the nutshell answer, it was 2 years, lots of tears.
Mm.
I
Mm.
would start writing, and feelings that I had thought I'd put behind me would come up, mostly guilt. So much guilt for things that I should have said, things that I shouldn't have said, feeling I shouldn't have had. And it just kind of brought that all up to the surface. So I would start writing and I would find myself just scribbling madly about more things that I should have done. So then I would have to take that, put it aside, go into my corner, go get ice cream, go into my pool, reset for a couple days, and then come back to it and try to refocus. I wrote down all of the points that I wanted to make during my book, and I had to step away several times because it just became so emotional, so emotional. Every time I wrote a chapter, I had to relive that experience.
Mm. Did you have did you have any deadlines that you had to meet, or did you write it and then shop it around so that there wasn't that extra pressure?
Um, I finished it. I sat on it for a while. I did have 3 or 4 groups of people waiting for it, but they knew what I was experiencing it. So they were very patient with me. And when I was ready, I didn't shop my book around really uh, for the purpose of just letting it develop what it was going to become because I wasn't sure what path it would take me on. The groups that I did have waiting for me, there were 2 mortuaries that wanted me to come and speak about my book, and there were some hospice facilities, and there was an acute care center. They all knew what I was doing, and when I did finish my book, they invited me in to talk to families and to do book readings,
Mm.
and it was tough. And in my audiences, there were a lot of tears, because I read probably 4 or 5 sections from the book.
It is an important message to get out. I think that the more that we share about these things from a perspective of someone who's gone through it or who's going through it, the more we
Right,
educate people who haven't gone through it yet, they'll know what to expect. They'll be able to make those decisions to make their quality of life as good as possible up until that time.
right.
What
Mm.
advice would you give others who are currently watching their parents or loved ones at the end of their life?
Oh, so many different things based on my experience. First of all, to love them, to um, accept that it's going to end, and to be patient with them, because knowing your life is coming to an end sooner rather than later, that is scary, scary, scary. And people react differently. Um, they get angry. The families get angry because they see it, because they're scared. So it just, be patient, be understanding. Remember what this person is going through. And remember that when somebody is in pain or facing death, they become angry. They may lash out. Their style of communication changes. It's not personal. And it's so important to let them do what they need to do and continue to remind them that it's okay to be angry, to be fearful, and understand and communicate in a manner that's consistent with how much you love them and want to be there to support them.
Mm,
That's the most important thing in the entire world when you're facing somebody you love that's close to dying.
thank you. I know that we are at the end of our time. Victoria, thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing your deeply personal experience with us. And for those who are interested uh, in learning more about your work or wishing to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
The If you look at my website, it's deathandlove.net. I have my email address on there, and I believe I actually also have my telephone number. I'm not going to give it out. But there are several ways to contact me on my website. I am happy to help and answer questions, personal questions, and I am happy to listen to people, what they're going through, and know that I have an understanding of what they're experiencing at the moment. I wish there was a me when I was going through this. And because I did this, hopefully I can help other people.
Education and sharing your experience
Thank you so
is
much for having me
wonderful.
today.
You're welcome. Folks, we've talked a lot about the complexities of end of life decisions and family dynamics. It's a conversation. Okay, take two. Folks, we've talked a lot about the complexities of end of life decisions and family dynamics. It's conversations like these that show the different paths we may take during our most challenging moments and remind us of the support and understanding available through these experiences. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please comment below or reach out to me directly. And if you found this conversation to be helpful, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. This is Traci Arieli from Comforting Closure, wishing you peace and comfort in your journey. Until next time, take care.